Hello everyone. Today we are looking at a crime committed in Italy by an American national. We start in Washington DC and end in Milan. So sit back as we go to the early 1900s. Porter Charlton lived in Washington DC and was the son of a well-known former federal judge. His father left the law courts to work in the War Department Bureau of Insular Affairs as chief legal officer in this US government department. He oversaw the civil aspects of the administration of territories following the Spanish-American War. The Charlton family were very well respected, and Porter had a very comfortable upbringing. After he finished his studies, Porter found work as a clerk in the National Bank of New York. He was a mild-mannered young man and a diligent worker, but he was also very short-tempered. Shortly after he started working in the bank, Porter met the actress Mary Scott. Mary was the daughter of a wealthy San Francisco coal merchant, and since she was a child, she had dreamt of being a famous actress. Her life, however, had not been as glamorous as she had hoped. After leaving her family home in San Francisco, Mary had married a lawyer who eventually became the future Assistant United States Attorney. But as she had an affluent upbringing, she was used to the finer things in life, and during the marriage, her financial demands and lavish spendings meant her husband was unable to support her, so the couple divorced. She continued to chase her dream and was given a role in the stage play The Princess and the Butterfly. While preparing for her role, she met fellow actor Neville Castle. It didn't take long for the two of them to become lovers, and soon after they married. In 1905, Mary and her husband came to New York City to try and find fame and fortune. The fame and fortune she so desired was not coming quick enough for the impatient Mary, and the marriage to Neville started to have issues, and eventually the pressures of trying to fulfill Mary's dream became too much, and the couple divorced. Mary carried on chasing her dream of being a famous Broadway actress. In 1909, she met a lawyer named William Craig, and the two of them started an intense relationship. But after a while, Mary's intense and demanding nature became too much for Craig, so he decided to end the relationship. Craig was a gentleman, so decided to take Mary to the Peacock Alley restaurant to tell her that he thought it was best they should go their separate ways. It was now August 13th, 1909. Mary was not happy with the bombshell, as she had fallen in love with Craig, and not taking the news that he wanted to end a relationship well, she reached into her bag and took out a revolver. She then shot her lover at point-blank range. Miraculously, the bullet hit his fountain pen, which was in the inside pocket of his jacket. He had escaped death, but Mary was arrested and charged with attempted murder. Mary went to court but was granted bail. When the court eventually heard the case, she was not given a custodial sentence, so was free to return to fulfilling her dreams in New York. She was now a 40-year-old, twice divorcee and a pretty unsuccessful actress, and her youthful looks were starting to wane. She had become a very nervous and short-tempered person. Then, in February 1910, she was introduced to the young New York banker Porter Charlton. Porter was half Mary's age, a young man just finding his way in life, and she an experienced lady who knew both wealth and hardship, and had spent the last few years around high society men. Mary was 40 and found her life blank and broken. Her dreams had not been realised, and here was a naive New York banker, the son of a highly ranked US government attorney. A month after they met, Porter and Mary got on a train to Delaware and they got married. Porter's father was not at all happy about the marriage. He realised that this was a case of his son being infatuated by an older woman, and he thought that Mary was only with his son as a last attempt to get some stability and financial support after her failed marriages and failed career. After their brief honeymoon, Porter began feeling weak and run down. He looked tired and complained of not having any energy. His father sent him to a doctor who diagnosed the onset of tuberculosis. Judge Charlton was very concerned about his son's health, so gave him some money and arranged for the newlyweds to travel to Lake Como in Italy to go and breathe the fresh Italian air so Porter could recuperate. The couple arrived in Italy and Mary was excited to be in such a new and different environment. Porter was more concerned about his health and was starting to realise that in marrying Mary he had mistaken infatuation for love. As he worked in a bank, he knew he had to budget with the money his father had given them, but Mary had other ideas and was spending the money as fast as she could, probably thinking that when they had spent it all, they would get Porter's father to send some more. Mary's spending meant the couple started to argue constantly. These arguments became so loud the couple were asked to leave the Lake Como hotel and instead had to find a small villa near the lake. Nothing changed in the villa. Mary kept on spending and the couple kept on arguing. The only difference was there was no one else to hear their constant rows. On the night of June the 9th, 1910, their arguments continued, and the young New York banker, concerned about their financial situation, concerned about his health, and concerned that he had married the wrong woman, was reaching breaking point. Mary started insulting her husband, insulting his ability to support them financially, and insulting his ability as a husband. And after this barrage of insults, Porter snapped. He grabbed a mallet with which he had been using to mend a broken chair and hit his wife in the head with it. He hit her 3 times and knocked her unconscious. The young man was scared and shocked and started to panic. He thought he had killed his wife, and if discovered, he would be executed. Young Porter was not aware that Italy had abolished the death penalty 21 years earlier in 1889. What could he do? He decided on a plan to dispose of Mary's body. So he emptied her travel chest and put her inside. He then added heavy stones. He waited until night time, and making sure no one was around or no one was rowing on the lake, he dragged the chest to the edge of the pier near the villa and pushed it off the side. He then watched the chest as it sunk to the bottom of the lake. He then went back to the villa to sleep before putting stage 2 of his plan into action. He took a train from Lake Como to the Italian port city of Genoa and purchased a second-class ticket on a ship to New York City. He waited for 4 days and spent his time walking around the Genoan streets, thinking about what he had done until the ship left port. He was fearful of being arrested, even when the ship left Genoa, but once it had left the Mediterranean Sea and entered the Atlantic Ocean, he comforted himself with the idea that he was going home and that his wife's body would never be found. Porter knew that a chest with some stones and a dead body is denser than water, so it would sink. But he didn't know that while at the bottom of the water, gases which are lighter than water would build up in the dead body and make it less dense. Then, after the body becomes less denser than the water, it will rise and start to float. Porter had not put anything like the number of rocks in the chest needed to keep the body submerged forever in a watery tomb, and 3 days after the murder, the chest floated to the surface, where it was recovered by some fishermen. The fishermen took the chest to the shore and contacted the Italian police. The police made inquiries, and on speaking to various local people, soon identified the body to be that of Mary Charlton. They then tried to trace her husband, and their inquiries led to the Tuscan city of Genoa, and they learned that Porter had boarded a ship. The Italian authorities notified the American police that they believed that Porter was aboard the ship SS Princess Irene, bound for New York. When the ship docked in New York City, the police quietly boarded the ship before anyone was allowed to leave. They quickly passed through the passengers until they came to a passenger named Jack Coleman. On comparing a photograph of Mr. Coleman to the person they were looking for, they decided that the passenger was in fact Porter Charlton. Porter was immediately arrested. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station. After intense interrogation and denial of his true identity, he was eventually identified by Mary's brother, Captain Henry Scott. Porter now realised that his true identity was known and his crime had been exposed, so he asked the police if he could make a statement, and he articulately told the whole story of his illness, his wife's excessive spending, and the constant rows. And despite the fact he loved his wife very much, that day he lost complete control of his actions and killed her. Porter Charlton's strange ordeal was just beginning. The extradition conventions between Italy and the United States did not provide for the case in which a criminal is a fugitive in his own country and confesses to his crime, as Porter had done. The Italian judicial authorities maintained that they were entitled to have Porter extradited back to Italy. Porter's father sought to prove that his son was insane, which would stop him being sent back to Italy and would result in Porter being committed to an asylum in New Jersey, the state in which he was arrested. A doctor examined Porter at the insistence of his father and had no hesitation in declaring that the young man was indeed insane. The press were very intrigued with the case, and bizarrely, the authorities, under strict police surveillance, allowed Porter to hold a press conference. He said that he did not wish to discuss the relations between his wife and himself before their marriage. He said he met Mary and fell in love. The age gap made no difference. He said that Mary charmed him, and they were very happy when they sailed to Europe. The police in Italy had found at least 7 blows had been struck on Mary, and when a journalist suggested this to Porter, he strongly denied it. He added that for a brief moment his mind had left him, but he only struck her 3 times. The Italian authorities challenged the insanity diagnosis and went to the courts to get Porter extradited back to Italy. The dispute on whether Porter should stay in the USA or be extradited continued. He had admitted killing his wife, but the crime was committed outside the jurisdiction of an American court, so he could not be charged for the crime in the USA. Even though Italy had no death penalty, the punishment for premeditated murder was life in prison, with the first 10 years to be served in solitary confinement. Usually this resulted in insanity or death before the prisoner was released back into the general prison population. On December the 10th, the US Secretary decided to honour Italy's request for Porter's extradition. Porter's attorney immediately appealed to the courts, which upheld his request. In February 1911, the case was heard before the United States Supreme Court. It took the justices more than 2 years to decide that Porter could indeed be extradited, and in August 1913, the young man who had spent the last 3 years in a New Jersey jail was put on a ship and sent back to Italy to stand trial for the murder of his wife, Mary Charlton. The trial was due to start in Milan in January 1914, which was nearly 4 years after the crime was committed. Europe, however, was going through a turbulent time as war loomed across the continent, so the trial was delayed until May. But before it started, the Italian authorities reduced the charge to unpremeditated murder, which carried a far lighter sentence. This delayed the trial even more, and it eventually commenced in October 1915, at which time Europe had been at war for 15 months. Porter was convicted of unpremeditated murder and sentenced to 6 years, 8 months in prison. He had, however, already served a total of 5 years while in the USA and Italy, so he was released from prison 29 days after his sentence was passed. Porter stayed in Italy until he could get a ship back to the USA, arriving in New York on the SS America in January 1916. He was a free man. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's always great to read your comments on the videos, so please keep them coming. If you are new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe and hit the bell icon. And I will see you in the next brief case.